Hello and welcome back to Flight Path, your weekly inside look at what's new in Tern, what's coming next, and how you can make the most of our latest features in your business. I'm Brad, Tern's head of design, stepping in for David today, already cracking up because we've never done this without him. He's taking a well-deserved day off today, right before a conference in Europe. So, David, I hope you're having the best time. We're going to make do without you. Joining me today are Molly, our head of product, and Jade, our product and operations specialist. We just make up a new title for Jade every time we're here, but she does a little bit of everything. And today we're diving into some big updates around suppliers and commission reconciliation, both of which are pretty exciting improvements for agencies. Before we get into that, just a few quick housekeeping notes. First one is if you missed yesterday's webinar where we demoed all of the new features we've launched this year, don't worry, it'll be up on our website on the blog early next week, so you can catch up on all of that. I'm sure we'll send it out in an email as well, so stay tuned there if you missed it. Also, exciting news, registration is officially open for our first ever users conference. We're hosting a 5-day event from September 10th through 15th aboard the Virgin Voyages Brilliant Lady. The details are available at tern.travel/conference. If David was here, he'd tell you how incredible it is, that it's like the second ever sailing on the ship, and like how valuable the conference is going to be. You can find all the details on the website. Again, tern.travel/conference. We're really excited to be there with you. I don't think we're doing a live podcast recording, but like maybe David ropes us into that by the time that comes around. So if you want to be there, definitely recommend checking that out. And then finally, if you haven't yet, would definitely recommend you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And yeah, drop us a like or a comment. We do read them all. And yeah, we love engaging with everyone who's listening. So I think we made it through the intro. We did all right.
That was amazing. And if it wasn't for Jade and I making you laugh, it would have been even more flawless. So well done. Well done.
Incredible. But yeah, it's been a really busy week here. We had a big webinar yesterday. So how are you doing? Molly, how are you doing? What's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, webinar was great. I think okay, I have two takeaways. One is serious and one is not. The first is that I really need to do a call out to the community not to encourage David with his whole hat bit. Like in the podcast, he was talking about putting on different hats and people were saying they'd send him hats, and we just need to shut that down. So like, if you want to rally around us and like discouraging him, please do. So that's my unserious takeaway. But no, I think on a more serious note, like the amount of people who just, they didn't even talk about the features as much as like just talking about how apparent it was that we just listen and care so much about our users and community. Like, I don't know, there's just no better feeling to hear that from people. And it was just like this consistent in the chat, follow-up emails we got, Facebook posts we saw, like of just people saying how apparent it is that we listen. And that's just the best compliment we could ever get, honestly, as a product team. So yeah, it was just that was my takeaway, was just like that spirit from the community is just the best thing in the whole world. So
Yeah,
that was
that's
me.
so cool too, because it's not even just listening, right? It's like, oh, they see us shipping things, and like, not just did you listen, but you like took what you heard and you like acted on it pretty quickly and well. So super cool.
Yeah, webinar week at Tern is the energy. The whole entire week is so much fun. And then, yeah, I think everyone sees the energy in the webinar itself, but reading through the chat and seeing all the support for not only like how we build products and how we listen and how quickly we're able to iterate, but the support also for the team and like how much the Tern team cares and like how visible that is too. It's just like all the love for all the individual teammates is a really fun thing to see. And then the thoughtful, I spent a lot of time in the Q&A, and the thoughtful and really focused feedback that comes in too about the features that we're talking about and, you know, existing features is always, you know, is really fun to read through. And you should have seen like the internal user feedback channel that we have in Slack just blowing up and like discussing, you know, how could we think about like the active, not only hearing about how people value us listening, but like the active during the webinar, us like consolidating and chatting about feedback coming in is really cool.
Yeah, that's like always the thing at Tern, right? It's like so fun to ship features that we know will be really valuable to our users. And then it's like here are the 500 new things that we need to do to make them better. And it's always that. It's like celebrating the wins while also talking about like the 500 other things that we need to do, which is really fun.
Yeah, I had in the chat. I know we like tell people we're not going to respond to questions in the chat, but multiple people were like, "Can we change this UX or on confirmation numbers? Like, dear God, please!" And I'm like, yes, yeah, we hear you. We've got it in canny. We're totally listening. We have some ideas. Just got to prioritize it. I promise. But yeah, when it's happening live, you feel even more like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll get there.
Yeah, it was fun. Like lots of questions were coming up about the roadmap before Molly got to some of the roadmap. So
and I was like, excellent.
Invoicing. I'm like, okay, Molly's gonna be talking about this soon, just in 20 more minutes. So that was great too.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or reflections on the webinar?
What about you, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I had a great time. I was like really nervous yesterday because I only talked through my track one time, and I was like, oh, we're gonna go for it. It'll be fine. But I thought it went really well. It was really exciting to just like see the chat blowing up. Even just like once we talked about agency suppliers, I could see like, oh my gosh, it's happening. Yeah. People are excited, and not just excited about, well, we're going to talk about suppliers in a second, so I won't dig into the details yet, but it's been fun. All right, so with that in mind, let's transition to actually talk about more of some of the pieces we actually shipped yesterday and give an overview of in the webinar, starting with agency suppliers. And Jade, I'm going to throw this over to you. Like, do you want to just kind of introduce what agency suppliers is and the details behind the project?
Yeah. Agency suppliers is a way for agency owners to consolidate and really clean up the supplier list that's available to your agents when they're creating bookings. So I think everyone's experienced the pain probably of looking for a Disney supplier in Tern, seeing 15 entries of kind of different naming conventions, maybe ones that were created to make it easier to find one for your particular agency. So this really gives agency owners the control to create a clean and consistent list of suppliers that's prioritized first for your agents as they're creating bookings. And yeah, I mean, Brad and I have been talking about this. Like, it was such a complicated project for us to think about. And then when we were going through and testing it and trying to show it, it looks so clean and simple. I think that's exactly what you want. But yeah, it was so exciting to see all the feedback come in and the excitement about it in the webinar. Anything you want to add, Brad, about the feature overall?
Yeah, I think I've also been pleasantly surprised how much people are excited about like the content side of suppliers too, like the clean list. But then also, as we were talking to agencies, often we'd hear like, oh yeah, I have a spreadsheet with all this information somewhere, or like, we have like a wiki somewhere for our team to like go reference. We're like, oh, okay, like wait a minute, that's like pretty easy for us to let you just pop that into Tern. So it'll be really cool to see how people start using that. I think we had some early stats this morning that a couple agencies had already added over 50 suppliers to their profile in Tern. So
40 agencies have already added at least one. That's crazy. It's been
40 agencies have added at least one?
40. And it's only been live for like a day. So that's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, the content too, like not having to go to a spreadsheet to search for the specific information from your agency about who to contact if there's a problem or where you can book and kind of the process. It should really simplify things. And yeah, I've seen some some really intense ways of having to consolidate this information that now, we can bring all into Tern.
Yeah, and it'll be cool. I think like as we think about the future of this, again, like most things, we got a version out and I'm sure there'll be plenty of things we do to layer on top of it. But we definitely heard from folks that structuring some of that information could be helpful, like having an explicit field for like, who's our BDM here? Like what is, like what often being able to say, here's the cancellation policy and the like refund policy, set that at the agency level. So all of your advisors can be using that same exact language and have really easy access to it when using bookings. So there'll be some cool stuff there. And then also maybe just to talk about like why it's kind of hard or complicated on our end. We really do believe that it's important, like eventually we'll be able to provide information about suppliers in Tern. Like we'll be able to supplement that information. So we want to make sure that even though maybe we're saying goodbye to this global list that can get a little noisy, but we still know generally, like, when you put Disney in your list of suppliers, we know who that is on our end. So if we ever have content from Disney, say, or from a consortium about Disney that we'd want to make available to you and your agents, we have a way to link that. So there's a lot of stuff kind of behind the scenes happening to like make sure we're still keeping track of those references if we want to add on to that later.
Yeah, and making sure that we update as you create your preferred suppliers, that we update, or not preferred suppliers, sorry. We've not named it preferred suppliers, and it's agency suppliers. But yeah, making sure that we update any bookings that are associated with that global supplier was a big project. We wanted to make sure to keep your reporting consistent and update all that historical information.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was one more thing we wanted to talk about here. You got a bunch of questions in the Q&A,
Yeah.
Jade, during the webinar.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions about when this would be available to individual advisors. And the answer is we're not sure yet, but we do want to gather feedback from how agency admins are structuring their list, what's working well, how advisors are utilizing that information. And then we'll think about and be able to share more information on a timeline for individual advisors. But we definitely hear you. It's on our radar. We just want to gather some feedback first before we commit to a timeline on the individual advisor side of things.
And the good news is, because we've done it for agencies and we knew we were going to do it for advisors, we've made our life a lot easier to add that. We just have to prioritize it. So it won't be like the same amount of work to do it for advisors. It'll be a smaller project that we're able to do more quickly.
Yep. Yeah, and there's a canny, or there's like a request in our feedback tool already that people can upvote if they want to. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Great. Anything else on suppliers?
That's it.
All right, let's jump to the next one then. So in addition to, an entire supplier management thing we just released 2 days ago, something else also happened that day. So Molly, you want to take us through the next big thing?
Yeah, nothing like launching 2 major features the like late afternoon right before the big webinar. So it always gets the blood pumping. So payout statements was the other really big feature. This one was exciting personally because we got so many emails from like a lot of our early adopter agencies who kind of took a bet on us right away and started using us when not everything was in place. That was like, I just need this one last thing, and then I'll fully be able to switch over from tests, or be able to stop using kind of these like time-consuming workarounds. And that one thing is being able to consolidate all of the bookings for any given pay period to more efficiently pay out my agents. So instead of seeing a single line item for every single payout related to a booking for my agent in any given pay period, just being able to group all those things together, really. And that was like the last thing. And shout out, I think Jen had actually even created like a template that you could like export Tern bookings into and paste them into a spreadsheet. And then it would do this, and it, saved a lot of time. It still was like this whole manual workaround. And I think she shared it in Facebook to help others. So thank you for doing that in the meantime. But that is not necessary anymore. You can do this yourself. So it was just fun for that reason of like hearing over and over, this is like the last remaining thing. And we even had in the webinar when we kind of demoed it, someone shared that with this new feature they found, they were able to like pay their agents in 8 minutes, like just cool stuff like that. So it was a fun one for that reason. We did a live demo at the webinar. So if you didn't catch that, we definitely recommend checking it out.
Yeah.
This was really, I think we talked about this on a podcast a few weeks ago, but David was doing a demo recently and kind of going through the whole agency flow. And then, he got to payouts, and it was kind of this missing piece. And it was so exciting to see this come to life and like be able to do the full circle demo of like start to finish, like the whole back office process. And and for Jen too, to kind of, for that spreadsheet to serve as a guide for exactly, what we wanted to build and how we wanted to build that process was great. Yeah,
it's also been, it sounds pretty simple on our end. That's just like, oh, anything that's ready to be paid, like just show it here and let it be exported. There's actually a bunch of work. We had to like touch a bunch of other areas of code to make sure that once you've marked a statement as paid, none of the amounts of like the payouts could change. Then like you wouldn't update them because then the like statement wouldn't be balanced anymore. Yeah, so that required us to like go through all of the like adjustments code, all of the bookings code, like make sure you couldn't delete, a booking after it was attached to a payout because you'd lose like that that reference. And so the engineering team did a great job like making sure they went kind of line by line and like found all those places, and we had to address like what do we lock and how do we disable fields to make sure it all works so you couldn't get into a weird state. But yeah, it should just work now. You won't even really notice it as an agency owner. The other thing I think maybe that's worth talking about is, Jade, I think you had a question come up almost immediately that was like, oh, I don't see anything in my do tab. Like, why is that? Do you want to talk about kind of like what that was and how we should make sure folks are using it?
Yeah. So this question was using the expected payout date. Is that what it's called?
Eligible for payout?
Eligible for payout date, yeah. Eligible for payout date, setting that into the future will not, if that's not as of today, then it won't be in due yet. So if you're using the eligible for payout to kind of put things on hold so that you could pay them on time, you no longer should need to do that, right? You can just mark them as eligible for payout as of today, and then everything will be in due, and you can set the paid date into the future. That's the recommended workflow, right? Or like if that's the workflow that you're trying to.
Yeah, there's a few layers to it. So I think some folks were using eligible for payout and they were setting it to like the exact date they were planning on running payroll. So they have to like adjust it every time to say like, oh, I'm going to run payroll on Friday. I need to like set this eligible for payout on Friday. And so there's like a bunch of manual work to do that. You don't actually need to do that. Instead, you just say like, oh, if I'd be comfortable paying this today, like I'm not worried about clawing it back for any reason. They've already traveled. It's just like, it's eligible for payout as of today. And then when you go to pay your agents, I know not everyone calls it running payroll. When you go to pay, just all those things that have been accumulating that already will be there for you. So you don't need to be like saying, oh yeah, I need to hold this until that exact date I pay. You just say like, as long as the trip traveled or I'm comfortable paying this out, it'll automatically get included in the next statement when you go to pay. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's correct. And yes, we also got the feedback that, you couldn't mark a date paid as in the future. So now that also unlocks the ability for you. You don't have to wait until the exact day that payroll runs anymore. Now that unlocks that workflow too. So
yeah, and the nuance there, right, is like, oh, I kind of like export everything. I like export the amount that I'm going to pay my agents today, but it's not actually going to land in their bank account for a couple of days because I have to like send it to the accounting team who does something. And so you want that date to reflect like what your agents are actually going to like when they're going to get the money, what it'll say for them, even though you're kind of like exporting everything to today and batching all that out. So that should work. All right. Hopefully we're not confusing people more. If you get into it with your agency of questions, always reach out. I know like there's a lot of functionality here. Like we account for a lot of use cases, just depending on your specific setup. Like, yeah, I might have some questions and always happy to.
We're also doing an agency getting started training on Thursday with Jennifer. And I promise that it will be crystal clear how this process works. So
even better. That's perfect. One other small thing, I should stop saying small thing. We also made a pretty good improvement to commission, kind of separate from these two big features, which is now agents have the ability to add notes to expected commission. So anywhere that they're reporting commission, or if they, for some reason, they need to give you more context about like what, why they picked a certain split or a certain commission type, they can now add a note right within the expected commission section, and that'll show for you when you're reconciling. So super helpful if your flow for something like personal travel is to tell them, oh, just put in a custom amount, like 100%, and add a note that's personal, and then when I'm reviewing, it'll get flagged as custom, and I'll take care of it. Or if you support a flow for like an agent to agent referral, and you need to know which agent referred them so they can get a split, they can add a note with the right agent, and then you can handle that workflow. So that should handle those two use cases very well. And I'm sure there's other reasons that folks will want to use notes. So that's there now. And again, you can find that under expected commission. Anything else to talk about what we did this week? Other than, a big webinar, shipping multiple features, the whole thing?
It's just been a week, like these huge features, and the webinar. So,
well, one thing that we didn't talk a lot about, but we did have a Q2 planning meeting with like our leadership team. And so if you saw me, if you're, active in Canny, you'll have seen I moved a bunch of things to planned that generated some really fun excitement, but we, talked about it in the roadmap section of the webinar as well. So if you missed that, definitely tune in. We kind of shared some of the upcoming features, not everything that we're doing. We, as we mentioned in the webinar, like to stay agile and adapt to feedback at any given time. But there are some big ones, invoicing, forms improvements, text editor upgrade, like a lot of things like that we know will be big wins for our users.
Yes, perfect reminder. And well, we won't talk about all of those things now. We do have a few things that we're working on within the next week or so. Maybe we can touch on those. So Molly, you want to talk about the first one?
Absolutely. So I think we touched on this a little bit last time, but just as a reminder, we're building two things related to contact collaboration. So the first is that we know, especially if you're working on contacts that are agency-wide, you may have the need sometimes to change ownership of that contact. So within a few days, it should be ready kind of early to mid next week, you'll be able, either as a contact owner or if it's an agency contact, as any administrator within the agency, to change over the owner of that contact, just like you can a trip if you're familiar with that. So that'll be really huge. And then along with that, we're also building the ability to import contacts at an agency level and assign out your agents to those contacts. So especially if you're considering switching to Tern, you no longer have to coordinate. If I have 100 different agents, each of them, upload your own contact list of a few hundred contacts or thousands of contacts. You can instead just say, here's, our thousands of agency level contacts, and put the right, agent owner for each, or just assign it to yourself as the owner and just auto share it with your whole agency. So that should really help, just especially with agencies considering switching over to Tern, to make that a little bit easier for you. So that should be a good unlock.
Yeah, that'll be so much more efficient. And just like one fewer thing you have to worry about telling all of your individual advisors, like, hey, I know there's a lot with switching. Also, make sure you do this thing. Like, yeah, got that covered for you.
And there's a lot of small things. Like I've been doing a lot of these contact imports recently, and there's a lot of small things like, a field that like doesn't capture address line 2, for example. And, you can change that if you only have to make that correction once, right? To match the two columns together, and not make sure that you educate each agent to make sure to do that. It'll just, I think, reduce a lot of potential errors in the contact upload, which can be a nightmare.
Yeah, that's going to be so good. One other thing we're working on that you'll start to see some changes around is form upgrades. So there'll both be some like just UI cleanup and polish to make forms like kind of feel more like the rest of Tern. It's something we built pretty early on before we had more of what we refer to as a design system. So some things don't match the same way. So there's some small things there, but then also there's some big functionality improvements that we talked about a little bit at the webinar, primarily being able to control actually which details you need to collect for each traveler in a trip request form or a group sign up form. So right now it's just a few basic details, but what we're moving towards is basically any information you can collect on a contact form today, you'll be able to collect for each traveler at the time that they fill out a trip request or a group sign up form. So that'll be huge and should tackle a ton of requests we get for like, wait, can you make this thing added? Can you have this thing be optional? How do I? And it's like, all right, yeah. We'll just like do it all. We'll get it all in there. It's gonna be actually really cool to get that out.
I've been wrestling with that as a part of the Tern user conference group trip sign up. So I'm personally really excited to chime in once that moves on the Canny board.
Jade will be the biggest fan. Cool. And then Jade, you've got some stuff on the training side, right?
Yeah. Now I've been thinking a lot about training, and we're thinking about how we can expand on the Tern Learn courses, particularly on the agency side. following up on the webinar, there's a lot of new features, a lot of new functionality, and really making sure that we have content that agency owners can refer to and lean on as they're getting started. But then we also have some live trainings next week. So we have an automations and workflow training on Wednesday. We have a getting started training for advisors that I'll run. And then we also have the getting started for agency owners that will run live with Jennifer. So that should really kickstart a lot of that content. So I'm excited about those.
Amazing. Wow, there's so much happening. The amount of things we do in a week, I continue to be amazed by. Yeah, just a little pat ourselves on the back there for a second. All right, well, I think we did it. David, we missed you. I hope we did this justice, but just as a little recap, the things we talked about this week: better supplier management, easier payouts, some smarter things around commission notes. So just huge quality of life improvements for agencies. Things should be continue to just get better and better there on the commission reconciliation side. And then, just a few reminders. Registration is open for our users conference. Find the link I'll tell you the link, tern.travel/conference, sign up there. And then also, if you missed yesterday's webinar, that'll be up on the website early next week, and we'll send that out. And of course, we couldn't leave without saying, if you enjoyed the episode, if you're interested in staying up to date on everything we're doing, make sure you like, subscribe, share comments. Again, we appreciate it all. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.